Hi, everyone. This is part 2 of our Bible recap of the book of Genesis. We ended yesterday, we were talking about Jacob, and he had 4 wives by now. He had Leah and Rachel and 2 servant girls that Laban had given to his daughters Leah and Rachel. He has 12 sons. Who become later the 12 tribes of Israel. He also has one daughter, Dinah, and he has now just about served 14 years under Laban, his father-in-law, and he's getting ready to leave, to go back to his homeland. God has told Jacob, go back to your homeland. You will have my protection. I am the God of Abraham. I am the God of Isaac, and I am your God, and I will protect you. And so Jacob gets ready to take everything that he owns, his wives, his children, his flocks, and all his belongings, because God has blessed him greatly over those 14 years. And he gets ready to leave. He knows that Laban has been shortchanging him in his wages and in everything that he has achieved up to that point. For example, whenever there were stronger sheep and lambs, those would go to Laban, and Jacob gave himself only the speckled and the spotted and striped lambs and goats, and those were always seen as inferior, but Jacob took those upon himself, and then he had done some things. He was very good at tending the flocks, and so the stronger ended up being the spotted and the speckled and the striped ones, and Laban had the weaker ones later, because God himself also saw that Laban was trying to shortchange Jacob. But Jacob decides it's time to go. He has God's promise, and he gathers everything together. And when Laban leaves a 3 days journey away, Jacob flees. And Laban learns of it and heads off to try to overtake Jacob. Before Laban gets to Jacob, however, God goes and warns Laban in a dream, says, speak neither good nor bad to Jacob. And Laban overtakes Jacob, and he says to him, let us make a covenant. God warned me that I should neither speak good nor bad to you. And so let us make a covenant. I have seen that God is protecting you, and you have God's blessing. And so Jacob he makes a covenant with Laban and says, let us part ways, and let's do it amicably. No good, no bad between us, and I will not come back to you, and you just stay away from me, basically. And they make this kind of pact, this covenant, and Jacob and his families go on their way. And what we see is in the kind of this wilderness in the desert, as they're traveling back, Jacob falls asleep and has a dream. He has this dream of angels in a ladder descending and ascending and descending, and it's called very famously Jacob's ladder. And Jacob believes this is the gateway to heaven, and he built an altar there. And we see also that he wrestles. This is a very mysterious, confusing part in the book of Genesis, in that he wrestles with a man. It could be God, it could be an angel of God, and he wrestles with this man or God all night. He neither loses nor wins. It's kind of like a stalemate in the morning. And the man, or the angel of God, hits Jacob on his hip. And this is to sort of weaken him, right? He weakens him. And I guess it became a tradition later for the Israelites that they would not eat the thigh bone of animals, sort of as a remembrance of the injury that God ultimately gave to Jacob at that location. So we see it's Jacob wrestles with God, and Jacob would, because it was a stalemate, he tells God, this man, that I will not let you go unless you bless me. And so the angel, or God, tells him, you will now be called Israel because you have wrestled with God. And so he now is called Israel, and Israel, of course, becomes this great nation. And we see that the 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Israel, they become great tribes, great families. And one of the sons of Jacob is named Joseph. And Joseph, being not the youngest, but the second youngest, and he has a dream. Joseph has a dream that he will get this. He will have. He will be very powerful, and that others will bow down to him. His brothers will bow down to him, and the brothers become very jealous and very angry. Like, they think he's very prideful. They think, who is this young, foolish man? Even Jacob, Israel, he questions him too. He remembers, he keeps it in his thoughts, but he says, you're so prideful and so foolish. Why would this happen to you? The brothers later connive into a plan to kill or to injure their brother for his pridefulness. And so they devise this plan, when they're in the fields tending their flocks, and Jacob sends Joseph out to them, and he has this coat, right? Jacob had made him a special coat, and he's walking out to them to see how they are, and they devise a plan before he gets to them, saying, let us kill our brother. And I think it was Reuben, the eldest, had said, do not kill him, do not harm your brother. And so the brothers devise a plan with Reuben to just throw him into a pit. Reuben thought that he could come back later and to free his brother from that pit. They throw Joseph into the pit, and then Reuben leaves. And then the brothers, Simeon and Levi, I think, are the next two oldest. And I think this is their plan, although all the brothers were involved. But they devised this plan to sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites. So these are the descendants of Ishmael, and they are headed on their way to Egypt. And they come up with this plan to sell their brother, to make some money, make a profit. They sell him. Joseph is taken away by the Ishmaelites as a slave. And they take him to Egypt. And in the meanwhile, Reuben comes back and sees that his brother is now gone, and they now have to come up with a plan to tell their father what had happened. And so they kill an animal, they put the blood onto the coat, they take the coat back to their father, and Jacob begins his mourning. He is just devastated. Now, Joseph and the youngest, Benjamin, were the sons of Rachel and Jacob. Jacob greatly loved Rachel all their lives, and Rachel died in childbirth, having the youngest, Benjamin. And so Jacob is devastated. He is grieving. He tears his clothes. He's just in mourning for having lost his son with Rachel. And so we see that Joseph is then taken to Egypt as a slave, and God was with Joseph. Joseph is he is blessed by God, even in Egypt, even in everything that he does, even as a slave. And the Pharaoh's servant or official, Potiphar, had taken him under his wing and in his house, and he could see that God was blessing him. So, but Potiphar's wife tricked Joseph, tried to get him to sleep with her, and when he wouldn't, she grabbed his clothes. He had left the clothes and took them to her husband and said that he had abused her, he had raped her, and Potiphar then throws Joseph into prison. So we see Joseph as a slave, as a prisoner now, and he is supposedly blessed by God, right? He is in a season with God where he has to have great faith in order to survive. And he does. He has great faith in God, even though he is suffering and made to suffer as a slave and as a prisoner in Egypt. He sits in the prison, I think it's 12 years, and he is able to even flourish in prison. We see that the head of the prison guard, looked to Joseph to take care of the other prisoners, and he does so. He has kind of a complete run of the prison, but he's still a prisoner and he's still a slave. And so there were two men that were thrown into the prison with him, one a baker and one the wine taster, the cupbearer for the Pharaoh. And they both have dreams. The dreams are very similar, where, Joseph, who sees these dreams, he's able to interpret these dreams, knowing that the cupbearer, he prays to God and he's able to interpret. The cupbearer will be restored back to his position. The baker will be killed, and the time period would have been 3 days. And it does happen, just as Joseph had said. But the one that the cupbearer that was going to be restored, Joseph tells him, "Remember me when you go back to the Pharaoh." And unfortunately, the cupbearer forgets. He serves with the Pharaoh, and it wasn't until some time later that he remembers Joseph, because the Pharaoh has a dream that no one can interpret for him. And so the cupbearer remembers, oh, I was with a man in prison who can interpret dreams because of his God. He is greatly blessed by God. And so the Pharaoh sends for Joseph. Finally, he is out of the prison, and he listens to Pharaoh's dream, and he interprets that dream for him. It was basically two dreams, which made it very certain, and these were both from God, Joseph tells him. And that what they mean is that there will be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine, great famine that would completely overtake the 7 plentiful years. And this is an interpretation of the dream from God. And Pharaoh sees how righteous and how blessed Joseph is just from that interpretation. Joseph recommends that the Pharaoh take at least a fifth of all of the plentiful harvests and store those so that they can survive the 7 years of famine. And Pharaoh greatly respects him and tells him that he will become his number 2. He greatly esteems him, puts him in front as a leader just under Pharaoh. So only in the fact that the Pharaoh is the Pharaoh is the only thing that separates the two of them. He gives him beautiful clothing. He gives him all authority. He gives him servants of his own. And he puts him in charge to enact this plan that Joseph came up with of taking the fifth and to store those things. And so those 7 years become, everything's stored. They took all that plenty, and then the famine starts. And all of Egypt comes to Joseph, and they have to go through Joseph, according to the Pharaoh, to receive food, to buy food. And this is where we see Jacob's sons, Joseph's brothers, once again entering the picture. we see that even in the land of Canaan, the famine is great. And so Jacob sends his sons to go and to retrieve food, to buy food from Egypt. And so the brothers then see Joseph. They do not recognize Joseph. Joseph recognizes them. And he tells them, he plays some tricks with them, you're spies, and I want you to tell me, is your father still alive? Do you have any other brothers? Because the youngest was not going with them. They had not gone because Jacob couldn't part with the youngest. It was the only son left from his great love, Rachel. So Benjamin is in land of Canaan with Jacob. All the brothers are there, and they tell Joseph, who they just believe is an Egyptian official, that they have this other brother, and Joseph comes up with a plan to get this Benjamin and the father back to Egypt so that Joseph can see his father again. He hasn't seen his father in over 12 years, and his father thinks he's dead. And he misses his brother. And so he comes up with this plan of sending them back and forth, keeping one in the prison there. I think it was Simeon that they kept there in the prison. And while they waited for them to bring Benjamin, and then later they brought Jacob. Joseph reveals himself. He reveals that he's been circumcised. He reveals that he is their long lost brother. And he says very famously, what you have meant for harm from me, God meant for purpose. He meant for good. And it is to save a remnant of Israel. And the Pharaoh and Joseph instruct the brothers and to go and get their father and everything that they own, all of their family, and bring them back to Egypt, because the famine at this point was, I think it was only 3 years in, there was going to be another 3 or 4 years left. And so they go back, they get their father and everything. And Israel is just thrilled that his son is alive, and he can't wait to go. And they have wagons that they've brought to bring them all, because now Israel is extremely old and close to death. And so they all travel to Egypt. All of Israel went to Egypt, and they stayed in Egypt. And so they outlasted the famine. They are now settled in the land of Goshen in Egypt, and they flourish. They multiply exceedingly. God has greatly blessed them. God is their God, and they are greatly blessed in Egypt. And we see the very start of this kind of multitude, this abundance in Egypt. We see that Jacob blesses Joseph. He blesses all of his sons. He kind of issues different, half-handed blessings and full blessings. He blesses Judah. There is a famous line in there that the scepter shall not leave Judah. It's the lion. Judah is the lion, and the scepter shall not leave Judah. And that is a foreshadowing of David down the road, because David comes from the descendants of Judah. And then we see Joseph being blessed. His 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, are taken up by Jacob to partake in the inheritance that Jacob gets, because God has promised in his covenant that he will give all of this land, all of the land of Canaan, to Israel. And also the blessing and the multitude, right? That your descendants will be as numerous as the stars and the sands of the earth. And so we see that Jacob blesses his sons and includes Manasseh and Ephraim into that family, those sons, to get this inheritance that the Israelites will have in the future. We see that Genesis concludes with both the death of Jacob, Israel, and Joseph. and Jacob is later taken after death to be buried in the land of Canaan, where Leah is buried, where his father Isaac was buried, where where Abraham and Sarah were buried, Rebekah was buried, and so they take Jacob to be buried with his ancestors. We see that Joseph dies. He is kept in a coffin in Egypt, and Joseph instructs his brothers, someday God has promised that he will take us out of Egypt. When that time comes, take my body so that I can be buried with our ancestors. And that is a foreshadowing which sets us up for Exodus. So at the point we leave off in Genesis, Jacob and Joseph have died. The Israelites, all the rest of the tribes of Israel are greatly flourishing and multiplying exceedingly, and they are prosperous in the land. We start to see that because of the famine, there will become a jealousy, enviousness, jealousy, and anger towards the Israelites who have been blessed by God. They have survived the famine. They have exceedingly multiplied themselves. They are flourishing. And the Egyptians, having just made it through the famine, had to sell their land. They had to sell themselves. They had to give all their money to the Pharaoh. And so they are kind of left as slaves to Pharaoh without land. And we have the Israelites who now have this choice land, Goshen, and they are blessed by their God. So we kind of leave off. It's sort of a hinting of this jealousy and this enviousness. And we will see that played out more in Exodus. So the major themes of what we see in Genesis is, God's continuing faithfulness, God blessing the Israelites, God's covenant with the Israelites, and his continued plan to reconcile humanity back to himself through the Israelites. And if you remember in the very, very beginning of Genesis, God does tell Abraham that many nations and families will be blessed because of you. So that sets us up not just for Jews, but also Gentiles, right? We start to hear Jews and Gentiles, the Israelites and non-Israelites. And so we start to see also the theme of sin and the effects of sin, and how that greatly increased over the earth, and the devil being unleashed into the world. We have the devil amongst us today, and there is great evil in the world. A lot of what we see today in the world, we can compare back to the times of Noah, and even after Noah, after the flood, the effects of sin, the fruits of sin, right? We have the fruits of the Holy Spirit, we have the fruits of sin. And we see this foundation of Israel, the beginning of Israel, and where they started, and we'll continue with their storyline in the Old Testament as we continue through to Exodus. So a lot of really important points that Genesis is so important because it is the beginning of all beginnings, and it is the storyline that carries us through the rest of the Bible. It's why the Bible is so important. And these stories that we read about and we hear. So I hope that you took away a lot from this recap. I know it was a lot to cover. That's why I did it in two parts, day one video and day two video. But I think it's important to kind of sum up the chapters in the book so that when we go on to Exodus and the rest of the Bible, that you have a real clear understanding, and you have real good takeaways that you can point back to as you continue to listen. We have the Catholic Audio Bible, which this series is. You have the podcast with the daily reflections, and then the top 5 parts to each set of chapters. So it sort of ties it all in together. I hope that you all have a good rest of your day. I look forward to us continuing in our journey through the Bible.